one. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hello Again with me, Isabelle Broom. And we are starting the day the right way today because I'm joined by none other than the Cathy Bramley. Whoop, whoop. Yeah, that was really sort of quiet whoop, but
it is a Monday.
Inside I'm done.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining me. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I've been dying to make the Zoom with Broom joke for months, so I'm delighted to be Zooming with you, Broom.
And I love that you're in your writing shed as well.
I am, yeah. Cool. I'm actually going to do some writing as soon as we've finished. That is a promise.
Okay, I would make the same promise, but then I'd break a promise to you, and I don't want to do that. No, not so early on in the proceedings. Do you want to start by telling us a bit about you and your books, just for anyone who doesn't know?
In my books. Okay. Well, my name is Cathy Bramley. I married Mr. Bramley. It is actually my name. I get quite a few people asking me how I came up with my pen name. I just married Mr. Bramley, and it was easy. And I live in Nottinghamshire in a little village, and we have a tree house at the bottom of the garden, although Tony calls it the top of the garden. And I do sometimes write in here, which is fantastic. I started writing in my mid-40s with just set a challenge to myself to see if I could write a book. I never imagined for a second it would become a career. But amazingly, it has become a career. And I feel so fortunate to be able to say that I write full-time now, because it is just such a joy, not just because of the writing process, but all the people I've met and all that. I've been a reader all my life, and now a lot of authors who were my idols are now my friends. It's just amazing. I love it. So I write. It is, isn't it? So what I write feel-good escapism fiction, usually set in sort of a semi-rural village or small town. It's always got a feisty female at the centre of the book, who has been faced with a set of challenges that she's never had to face before, but decides to just give it a go. And quite often there's a bit of a business theme that goes through my books, whereas a failing business that she has to put right, because my background was I did business studies, or European business studies at university, and I just love fixing a business. I can't help it. So even if I don't set out to, I end up like trying to think of new income streams for whatever business whatever job she's got. I know. So that's what I write, really. And yeah, I write hopeful escapism, feel good fiction.
I like that your books are basically a guide to life as well as a good story. For anyone out there who's got sort of dreams of being entrepreneurial, get yourself Cathy Bramley's books and pick up some tips. And you write serials as well as novels, and I wanted to ask you about that, because obviously putting out a book in 4 parts takes probably a lot more planning than the sort of the method I adopt, which is sort of sit down and hope for the best and just keep going and then make sense of it at the end. You must have to meticulously plan to get that right. How does that work?
Well, I mean, it started when I was approached by a publisher, Transworld, and they asked me if I would be interested in writing a novel which would be serialized. So it was always a novel, but could be issued in parts. And my first thought was, well, if I write something which has very distinct, beginning and end, but an overall arc as well, it might work quite well. So I started. Ivy Lane was my first one, and that was written in seasons. So it was quite a natural, there was what happened in spring, what happened in summer. So it had a natural sort of flow to it. But then I realised that I could repeat this, I could replicate this in a story, but instead of looking at a 3-act structure, I look at each part of the book like an episode of a TV series. So if you watch a TV series like a drama, which it might be in 6 parts, even within each part there's like a rising action and a semi-conclusion, maybe a bit of a cliffhanger, which leads you on to the next part or next episode. So that's really the model that I took. And actually, even when I've written a novel that hasn't been serialized, I've tended to follow that pattern as well, because I find it quite a refreshing way to write. It keeps the content flowing and exciting. And it gives me a little mini break when I think, oh, I've got to the end of part one, even though there isn't a part one, you know, but I've got to the end. When you get to the end of a part, it feels like a mini celebration. So it's like having a big goal but breaking it down into smaller goals, which helps when I write, because it's such a massive task, isn't it, writing a whole novel?
Yeah, and actually you're so right there about each section needing its own sort of these small sort of, you know, events that happen and are either concluded or sort of steamroll or snowball into the next act. Because I think a lot of authors talk about the saggy middle of a novel and how sometimes you can struggle with pace, and you can struggle with, because that's the sort of meat of the story, isn't it? Or what they call the promise of the premise, is the kind of, you know, what your readers come in for is that middle section, that big chunk of exciting things happening in said location or whatever.
Yeah.
But sometimes it can feel a bit like you're just treading water until you get to the meaty stuff at the end. So I think that's great advice, actually, for anyone that's listening who's thinking of doing a novel.
Yeah, I think it's just keep the action flowing, and because quite often when you start, or you've got an idea for a book, you've got a beginning and you've got an end, and you're not quite sure when you set off always what's going to happen, you know, throughout the course of the book. But because I'm setting it out in quarters and publishing it in quarters, I know that I've got to have something really exciting happen at 25% and at 50% and at 75%. So, you know, to keep people interested enough to keep reading the next part. So that makes me really think about what could happen. That's, you know, I always think about my midpoint, like, is that going to be is everything going brilliantly, or is it going really badly? And it'll either be one of those two things. So either the story, everything's going along better than she could possibly have hoped, too good to be true, bam, bam, bam. Yeah. Or it's like, oh my God, this is an absolute disaster. She's never going to recover from this. So those are my two options at the midpoint. So if you keep that in mind when you're planning, and then you can work back from there, that's your peak. Then you've got, well, at 25%, you know, and 75%. It sounds really methodical, and I suppose it is quite organised, but yeah, that's the way it works. You have got this middle, as you say, this saggy middle, but I stop that by having, you know, it's either going absolutely brilliantly or disastrous, and so I have to decide.
That's a very good model. And I think much more, if you're coming at a novel from the start, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I don't even know where to begin, that's a good, actually having those plot points in place helps you feel less daunted because you already know what's going to happen at, you know, 2/3, 3/3 or whatever way through.
And I think as well is that people think, oh, well, if I plan, it'll be really boring when I write. No, it's not, because I might say that a quarter of the way through, she's going to have a major disaster. But I don't, and I might have a vague clue what that is, but I won't know where it happens. I won't know who is with her when it happens. I don't know and I don't know the sort of secondary characters. Who are they going to be? So although I've got a vague idea, when I plan, it's not all set in stone. I don't know the dialogue, you know. I just know roughly what's going to happen, and it just drives you forward. And sometimes I think, well, I'm not really sure now how to get from this part to the next part. So I think, well, what's going to happen then? What needs to have happened by then? So you can actually sort of fill in the gaps a little bit by taking a step back and doing sometimes I'll have a day of planning, even partway through the writing of a first draft. I think, right, okay, what are the next 5 chapters?
Yeah, I'm quite similar as well. I sort of stop and look back and think, right, you know, and look at my pile of scenes and think, right, what's happened and what hasn't happened and what needs to, like you say, and I'll do like a short synopsis for the next 4 or 5 chapters, just so that I feel like I can keep going. I think, every 10,000 words seems to me to be my natural sort of, right, okay, take a breather and think. So that's just go off on a tangent. Plus I forget things. I'm writing a book at the moment, and I forgot that my character wears glasses, and then I started reading back from the beginning, and I was like, oh yeah, I completely forgot she wears glasses. I had to go back and put glasses in all the way through. It's like,
Yeah.
Bizarre how the things you forget.
Or sometimes you'll have someone who's got a cat, and then you'll realise like you haven't mentioned the cat for about 30,000 words. Like, what's happened to the cat?
Probably not important.
Yeah.
But cats are like that. Cats tend to go in and out of your life, don't they? When they choose to.
Yeah.
So the nature of cats, whereas dogs are constantly under your feet, in the best possible way, obviously.
Yeah, completely.
You've had prolific success. I think it's fair to say you're way up there with the big hitters of your genre. And I just wondered what you would say is the sort of secret formula to fabulous fiction.
Oh, God,
if there is such
I don't
a thing.
really think I have had prolific success, but thank you for thinking that. Well, I don't know if there is a secret really. I do work really hard. I know I was speaking to my husband the other day, and I was saying, you probably should have some time off. Like, why don't you have some days off? And then he looked at me, and I thought, oh yeah, actually, I don't have any time off, do I? And I don't. He says, because being an author is a 24/7 job. Literally, if you're not answering emails or readers' inquiries, then you're thinking about your work. So I rarely switch off. But so I work hard, and I stick to my deadlines. I think I approach it as a business. So as far as I'm concerned, Cathy Bramley, the writer, is I'm like a little sport, a business that's got my products are my books, and I have to make the most of those, and I have to promote them, and I have to work with other people to get the most out of them. So being business-like, I think, has probably helped. So I try not to be too, I am completely emotional wreck most of the time. But I try not to be too much when it comes to things like editorial notes on my books. I completely take on board what my editor says, and because I know that she talks sense, and listen to other people, and work as hard as I can, really. But I don't know, I can't really answer that. I think I do everything that I'm asked to do.
I think a lot of authors do struggle with making that sort of, giving themselves permission to see themselves in that way, that you are a brand, and that obviously you're attached to your work in an emotional way, because it's so often about your own life and your own experiences, and you put everything inside you into these stories. So it's then hard to make that distinction between it being business, but it absolutely is, and you're right, and you need those sort of hours in the day, don't you, to just focus on the sort of selling side and the marketing side as well as the creative side. And it doesn't come naturally to everyone. I think it's a tough thing, but it's something to think about, I think, for anyone wanting to get into writing. It's not, because from the outside looking in, I think sometimes it's just like, you just write books and it's all great and fun and brilliant, which it is a lot of the time, but it's also really genuinely hard work. And there's a lot of things that go on around the writing.
And there's a lot of pressure on you as a writer to for each book to do better, and this was, and people say, oh, that was your best book, and you think, God, I might as well give up now then. So it's got to be quite tough and resilient. But I think, really, just thinking about the correct answer to your question should have been that I used to run my own marketing and PR agency. So I'm used to seeing a brand and thinking about how I want that brand to grow and where I see it going. And I suppose I've just applied that to myself. I've treated myself like I would a client's product. And I very much see, my job as a managing director of a small business that produces stories,
and I think that's invaluable, though. I think that's served you so well, because we've met loads and loads of times and stuff, and I've always been so impressed by how you can, because a lot of authors, we do sometimes sit around and we're like, oh, edits, and moan about this, moan about that, and you're actually come on, you just got to put the work in, you just got to do it, and that's the right attitude. That is the attitude more of us do.
Moan about edits. I've got some coming on Thursday.
You're still human.
But I think as well, it's a lot of authors, we're sort of made to feel so grateful that we've got an agent, and we're grateful that we've got a publisher, and that is true. But I think as well, we have to say, okay, then, you know, we are lucky to be in this position, but if something's not being done well, or we think that we could, you know, there's something wrong with the cover, or maybe the marketing hasn't really been the support we expected, it's no point sitting around a table with a load of other authors bitching about you know, how crap your publisher is. You know, you have to stand up for yourself and say, you know, okay, then what's the plan? Okay, we didn't get the sales we wanted, so what can we do now? Should we be looking at Facebook advertising? Should we be looking at tweaking the blurb? Should we be, you know, and actually being really proactive and saying, because at the end of the day, this is your book. You'll have one or maybe 2 books a year. They'll have hundreds. You know, they're publishing books every week. But you'll be the one that people will say, oh, that book flopped, and nobody will remember who else worked on it. You know, even though we're all part of a big team, nobody will remember who the marketing person was, or sales, or whatever. It's you, because it's your name on it. So I really fight for that, you know, and try and do my best to change things, and actually say if I don't think something's working. So
that's the great thing about the way the industry is now, is sort of so much more of it being digital, that it, you know, we do have the power to make those changes later down the line, and covers get changed, and authors' names get changed, whatever needs to happen to give the book a sort of second shot, which is really good, I think, because it can't have always been that way. But then I suppose, and there's just so many books now. I think that's partly why it's like, I used to work in magazines, and when I was sort of working at Heat at its peak, when it was selling sort of 750,000 copies a week, there just weren't that many celebrity magazines on the market. And now, you know, there was a time when it was absolutely flooded, and a lot of them have closed now, but it was difficult to sort of be the one that stood out, that had the head and shoulders above the pack in that scenario. And I think that can be the same in fiction a lot of the time. But I always think if you're someone that reads books, then you're going to read more books. Like, I don't know about you, but the writing community is so supportive, and I think it's that simple reason that if someone likes your book, chances are they're going to like one of your friends, and it works both ways. So we're all massively supportive of each other and champion each other's books for that reason.
Definitely.
And I can't think of another industry really that is like that.
No. You know? And also, at the end of the day, we're not just writers, but we're readers. We were readers a long time before we were writers, and so, you know, we love books, and we love championing books and championing those authors as well. So I think that helps in the whole supportive field, doesn't it? And we're both the Romantic Novelists Association, that's such a great organization to be part of. I'm a member, and lots of authors are members of that, and that's another place where we can get lots of support and mentorship and, you know, and advice from. So I think, you know, the publishing industry is really great for that. Yeah,
it is a great industry. How much of your real life do you think creeps into your books?
There are little small elements, I think. You know, there are small bits that it tends to be a scenario that might have happened that I remember and then put in, you know, but not huge amounts. I think that things like emotions like grief and loss and heartbreak are things that, you know, once you've experienced them, naturally want to make their way out. So I can't really say how much, but I know that things have crept out, but sometimes in a slightly different way. So something that'll have happened to me won't necessarily come out word for word, like, you know, but it might be the underpinning emotion. You know, so I think
it sits it up in the subconscious, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So I mean, sometimes, I don't know about you, but sometimes when I'm writing a tricky scene like that, I'll write something and it will feel revelationary to me, and I know that it's come out of me and my experiences in my head, but I'd never realized it before. I'd sort of had it come out of my character's mouth, for example. And it's really miraculous when that happens, when a book teaches you something as you're writing that you didn't know you already knew. It's like lessons from the brain coming out.
Really,
it's so
true.
weird.
That's really true. Sometimes one character will say something motivational to another, and I think, oh, that's such a lovely thing to say, and forgetting that I've actually written it, you know, like, and I think that that person said it to that person. And I think, well, I could have said that to someone because I obviously knew it, but I just never have.
Yeah.
I'll remember that.
It's so weird. It's such a weird process. How would you say your life's changed since you became a full-time author? I mean, you were mentioning earlier about having all the amazing new friends, obviously.
Yeah,
Myself
amazing.
included.
Yeah,
I'm going to put myself in there.
yeah, you can. That's allowed. It's completely changed. It's completely changed because before I used to run my own marketing and PR agency, as I said. So I had the job of trying to make my clients happy. And sometimes I probably did make them happy, but they only bothered to tell me when I made them unhappy. I also employed people, and then I felt completely responsible for those people's welfare and mortgages, and so I was glad to relinquish any employment. I'm so glad I don't employ people anymore. And obviously now I'm based at home, and it means I can have a dog sitting next to me all the time, which is lovely. And it's completely changed because now I keep office hours actually, so that's pretty much the same. But it allows me to be flexible. It allows me to do a bit more traveling. I go away on writing retreats, and I don't feel guilty because it's all work. And I just love it. I love being part of the book world. I love those sort of virtual friendships that I've made with readers. It's just great. It's sometimes I think I wish I'd done it earlier, but then I think I probably wasn't ready for it earlier. Writing has come to me just when I needed it, and I think it's just been the perfect transition from my last career into this one.
And you came into it with all the skills from your previous career as well, which have definitely helped. So I think I always wrote, but I wasn't ready to write a novel for a long time. Like I needed to go through my 20s and have experiences and travel and grow up a bit and actually stop navel gazing and look out at the wider world and think about other people and not just what I was doing, what I was feeling. I think once I got past that stage of my life and I was in my 30s, I had a lot more to say that was interesting, I think. I think before that I didn't. And I know it comes to writers at different times, and there are these, incredible 19 and 20-year-olds that have these deep and profound books that I could never have written at that time because I was too busy, I don't know, on a Tinder date or something. Or Tinder wasn't around when I was 20.
No,
what am I talking about? It would have been MySpace or mysinglefriend.com.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
I mean, my last job, I did do some writing in my last job, but it was mostly press releases and maybe copy for brochures or packaging or things like that. So it wasn't a huge amount, but I started a blog when we built our own house, and blogging really, I was doing, it's only a weekly blog actually, but it was really forcing me to do some writing every week and make it entertaining. And I really enjoyed that. And it was when we'd finished and I'd finished the blog, I was thinking, oh, what am I going to do now? With writing. There was no point carrying on the blog, because it was about building the house from day one to moving in. So the moving in date was the last blog really. And then I did a year on after that, but that was it. So it sort of filled that gap really. But so I think gradually I was getting the idea of writing. So it wasn't, it was a number of things which happened all around the time that made me think, I'm going to give writing a go.
And that was a good way to get into the rhythm, because I think people always say, like, how do you write a book? And I'm like, well, you have to, the bones of it are you have to sit down every day and put some words to paper. And actually that was a really good way for you to get into that habit. So when you sat down to do the novel, it probably didn't feel too strange.
No, it didn't. But also I think it's giving your imagination some permission to just think of, make things up. So maybe if you were starting, you could sort of just try and write some characters, like, right, there's a woman, so maybe you could sit in a cafe and make up stories for the people that were sitting around you. I do a bit of people watching, because actually developing characters and their backstory is a big part of it for me, and having those there ready for the start of the story. In fact,
It is
that's
really important.
sometimes I think if I'm stuck, I think, well, do you know what? It's because I don't know that character well enough. You know, I need to go back and find out why she is like she is, and what's her backstory, and what happened when she was 12, what happened when she left school, you know, fill in those gaps and find those key emotional driving points in her life, which has led her to where she is. And sometimes that can be quite eye-opening. So that's a good place to start with writing.
Definitely. And I've just got to that point in my book where I'm sort of 40,000 words in and realised that I know nothing about my central character, and actually she's someone completely different to how I wanted her. So I've had to go back to the beginning. But see, I should have followed that lesson. I thought I knew her, but I didn't, turns out. But it does take time. It's like any friendship with any normal person, you know, you peel back layers, and the longer you spend with someone, the more you find out about them. And that sounds completely bonkers, because obviously they're your construct in your head, but that is how it works, trust me, everyone.
I mean, it's happened twice.
Like magic.
It's backfired twice with me. Once when I was writing The Lemon Tree Cafe, and it was just wrong. The character was wrong, and actually the character was fine, but the story I'd imagined for her, she just wasn't going to do that. You know, I thought she's not going to agree to that. So then I had to just change the story. I had to go back, completely change the story. I kept her. And then the other time was when I was writing a vintage summer set on the vineyard, and I'd got these two characters, and I just, you know, it just wasn't working at all. And I thought, I'm desperate to write on about this vineyard. So I scrapped the characters, moved the vineyard from Sussex to Derbyshire, started again, and it was fine. And it was just, you know, there were so many elements that just weren't working. So, you know, that's why you have to just keep going with writing and not give up.
It's true. And trust your instincts as well. I think if something feels wrong, it's because it's wrong. 9 times out of 10. And I hate that feeling when I come to a deadline and I hand in something and I know it's wrong. And I know my editor's going to be like, this is a bit, what's happened here? You know, that horrible feeling. But that's happened to me quite a few times. Not this time. Determined. So what can you tell us about your new novel, My Kind of Happy? Because the first part 1 comes out fairly soon, doesn't it?
Yeah, about 3 weeks, I think. So My Kind of Happy is about a woman who, she's in her 30s, and she's just coasted along for the last few months because something terrible has happened to someone close to her, and she's just put her life on hold because she can't imagine a life without them. And so she realizes that she's forgotten what makes her happy, and she finds something which I can't say too much because it'll spoil it, but she realizes that she's got to find her own route back to happiness, and go back to find out what makes her happy. So she does that, and she decides that her number 1 on her list, without thinking too hard, was flowers. So she ends up doing a floristry course, and knocks on the door of a florist's. I can't really say too much, but anyway, it's quite a lot of floristry in there. But it's all about, the journey is basically about going back and finding out what will make you happy. And the idea is that, you know, if you were to die tomorrow, would you have regrets about how you spent your life? And if you can say no, then absolutely brilliant. If there's things that you would do differently, then there's no time like the present. Don't waste another day doing things that don't make you happy. Go for it. So it's
actually coming at the perfect time, isn't it? Because I think a lot of people during this period of lockdown have reevaluated their lives and thought, actually, what am I doing? Is my job making me happy? Because a lot of people's lives are too fast and too full on. And, you know, it's always working towards the next payday, working towards paying the next bill. And you don't really think, because you don't have time. And I think lots of people will make adjustments to their lives following the pandemic, just because they realised what it is that's missing from their life, perhaps.
Yeah. I was speaking to someone recently.
Have on the economy, but
yeah, I know. I think
dot.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it is a bit of a. I mean, it does worry me. You know, the economy really going off at a tangent. The economy does worry me a lot. But I think and it's going to take a long time before we readjust and come back But good businesses will come through, and you know, we're an innovative lot, aren't we? So I think we will get there in the end. It's just going to be hard for a little while. But just so we don't get too down the economics track, I watched a video. It was like a TED talk 2 years ago. It was actually a couple of hours before my sister's wedding, and we were just sitting on the terrace. It was a TED talk by a guy called Sebastian Terry, who writes. He's got something like, I think he calls it "What's on Your List," if you haven't seen it, look him up. He's Australian, and he's great, and he really inspired me. So that's where the
I'm definitely going to look that up. I'll try and do a link thing so you can watch it after this. If that is a thing you can do on YouTube, isn't it? I'll try my best. Right, we've reached the quick fire, and I usually do the quick fire questions in advance, but I thought I'd pick them out of a hat for the first time today. Well, it's not a hat; it's a coconut shell. You could wear it as a hat, but it's not. It's not very cool. It's not very cool. Right, we'll do 3. Okay.
Yeah.
Say when.
When.
Right. Question number 1. Oh, favorite book of all time.
Oh, that's really hard. Is there anybody out there by Marion Keyes?
Oh, brilliant. Okay. Question 2. Oh, do you have any unusual talents, or what is your party trick?
I don't know if I do, you know. I make a mean porn star martini.
Oh, that's a good one.
That'll do.
That's a very good party trick to have. Yeah. And question 3. Quite a lot in here. I sat around for about 2 hours yesterday afternoon going up with them. Oh, do you believe in ghosts? And if so, why?
I really want to. My friend saw a ghost, and I believe her story. So it was this, she stayed in a hotel, and and she woke up, there was a woman with a clipboard dressed in white at the end of her bed, and it turned out it had been a previous hospital. So I sort of do believe, but I've never seen anything myself.
No, I'm the same. I know quite a few people that swear blind that they've seen stuff, including my sister and my mum, who have got no reason to lie to me. And I also dated a vicar's son for a while, years ago, probably in my early 20s, and his father used to do exorcisms, and he was like, absolutely, it's true. Like, I've seen all kinds of stuff. And I was like, oh, you know, I've obviously, but then I always think, like, we could see ghosts every day. We just don't know they're ghosts. Like, you can just walk past people and they could be a ghost. So we could see hundreds all the time. Yeah. I really like that idea. Like, you know, like all those old photos where you'll see someone in the background who looks like they're from a different time, or someone that's not quite there and a bit blurry. Yeah. And I always think, is that just a photography thing, or is that a ghost? So that's what we don't know. I love it. I won't be writing any ghost stories anytime soon, though. I don't think that's my genre.
We'll leave that to Cress.
Yes, Cressida McLaughlin, who I must get on this chat as well, and we can just talk about ghosts for an hour. Yeah. All right. Okay, we've reached the end, but before we go, please do give us a plug for all your social channels. And have you got a most recent copy of your book there, Patchwork Family? Hold up.
Yeah.
Oh no, there it is. There it is.
Family by Cathy Bramley. There we go.
You can pick this up now and pre-order part 1 of her new novel, My Kind of Happy, which sounds amazing as well.
Oh, thank you.
And you have a Facebook group, you have a reader book club.
I'm really easy to find. I'm just Cathy Bramley on everything. I've got a YouTube channel as well, which I think is Cathy Bramley Books. But yeah, yes. I'm on everywhere.
Check her out, everybody. She's amazing. Thank you so much for being here.
You're very welcome.
Have a lovely day. Have a lovely day, everyone else watching. Thank you for watching. See you next week. Bye-bye.